All right, the hardware hound is back, and I have a lot of stuff going, a lot of stuff coming down the pipes here soon. So I wanted to give you guys just a quick update. For instance, I have right there a GTX 1060. We are actually going to have head-to-head reviews of the RX 580 and 570, followed by this 1060 coming up. I've got a bunch of cases, the reservoir, I've got a lot of things that I'm gonna be kind of slamming out pretty quickly here. So I wanted to give you that some status update, but I also really wanted to talk about my overclocking, where that's going with Ryzen, and I really want to recommend the best board right now for AMD. And really, I just do not think it's a competition. And I probably wouldn't have done this if it wasn't such a clear, if there wasn't such a clear winner right now. So, hey, quick little bit of status update, but let's get into Ryzen, overclocking, and motherboards. By the way, guys, I didn't want to forget something that I almost forgot, and that's to mention Epic Gear and thanking them for sponsoring me. So as you can see here, if you're wondering what these keyboards and mice are, they are all Epic Gear products. So I've gotten to spend like everything I've got. I've even got another combo of a Morpha and a Defiant up where I work at the hospital. So everything I use is Morpha and Defiant right now. And I'm telling you, guys, their mechanical switches, definitely. I mean, I've grown to love them so much. And considering that I came off of basically, you know, a form of red switches that were kind of copies of Cherry, but also having a Cherry brown keyboard that I'd used for so long, you know, to me, it's no competition. I love the feel. I love what Epic Gear is doing. I really think you guys check them out. I love the price. They give you this awesome actuation point on this awesome feeling switch that is also super affordable. So check out Epic Gear. I, really like them. I know if you caught my Rabbit review that you're probably like, well, what about the Morpha X? Well, yeah, the Rabbit was kind of an amazing design, but still, my favorite out of just normal traditional mice, Morpha X by far. I love the feel of that mouse in comparison to any other traditional gaming mouse I've used. So there we go, guys. Check them out. Links are in the description. Now let's move back on to my updates. Okay, so let's start out first with my top pick for AMD as far as motherboards are concerned. And honestly, guys, I don't even feel like it's a competition. And the biggest reason why I'm doing this, it's not because I've got any special favors asked or anything like that. The biggest reason why I'm doing this is there is one board that has made my experience just amazing. And it's because of that experience that I'm like, well, if you're out there about ready to build a Ryzen build and you're gonna have the same experiences that I had, well, I want you to have the best experience, not, an average experience. So I really want to point this out. Obviously, Aorus is the winner here. And when I'm talking about best motherboard, I feel like some of that can be a choice of whether you want to go with a B350 or an X370 chipset or various other things. But I'm talking about major brand. Aorus wins it hands down. And here's why. So first, let me start out with MSI. I built an MSI system for my friend and got to mess with the board. Now, overall, MSI has got something that they're doing amazing, and it's really the best out of everybody. MSI's BIOS is by far the best and greatest experience of anybody. I mean, it feels like you're in an operating system instead of in a BIOS almost. And I mean, it's so clean, it's so high definition. MSI and the amount of programming they put into their BIOS, their click BIOS, and the ability to use a mouse and stuff in it, best I have ever seen. MSI does a great job there. But one of the problems we've run into, and I'm hoping that I hope that this is the way to pronounce it, but I'm going to say a AGESA code, the 1.0.0.6 that AMD released. That AGESA code, I hope, is going to help fix a lot of those problems. But at the moment, my friend's build, we had to auto clock the memory and have it downclocked to 2100 megahertz, because anything more than that would get blue screen errors. And it's something like that if you're excited building a new system, you put 3200 megahertz RAM in, and you're blue screening and you're having problems. That's not something that you want to have happen. So the other board that I've got, and now this is the one that I'm doing part of my overclocking testing on, is the Crosshair 6 Hero. I was really nervous when Asus put Crosshair on it. And it turns out that my reasons for being nervous were slightly justified, because the Crosshair 5 was one of the buggiest boards that I ever used. And unfortunately, the Crosshair 6 retained some of that coming into this design, and I'm sure that's not really on purpose. But one thing I've noticed is the Crosshair 6 had some interesting situations where, like, if I'd set some BIOS settings, they wouldn't actually apply. I had a hard time actually finding the right settings to get my memory to set at the clock that it was set at, because I'd be trying to set my memory for 3000 megahertz, which would actually be downclocked slightly, like 2933 or something like that. But then I would go into my Windows and my memory would only be clocking out at like 2600 megahertz, even though it was actually manually set to 2900. And it turned out that I had to use the proper profile plus setting them in. It was just weird quirks like that. Now, to be fair to Asus, they was still stable, which is much, the Crosshair 5, I had a lot of stability issues, but it was just, there's quirkiness there. And when we get into my overclocking update, I'm gonna talk about some more quirkiness that I'm finding. But here's the thing, guys, Aorus, oh my goodness. I've not had quirks. Everything's just worked super smooth. I still really like their BIOS, even though I think MSI's might be a little better. Aorus, though, is just rock solid stable, very easy to adjust settings. Everything makes sense. Everything is very intuitive. I mean, there may be some settings that finding them may not be as intuitive. That could be a matter of opinion, but I've never found a BIOS that's like perfectly intuitive anyway. But it's still not hard to find settings. Memory has always worked. But this latest AGESA code update that only Aorus so far I've found has a beta BIOS, unless something's changed in the last day or two. But Aorus is the only one that's got a beta update with the latest AGESA code. And I tell you what, the sleep modes, everything's working great. I don't know what they're doing, but Gigabyte, you guys nailed it. Now, let me be fair, guys. When I say that Aorus is got the best, I'm not saying that Asus and MSI are doing a bad job. And actually, this is kind of amazing. We live in an era where all three of these companies that I'm talking about are doing good. They're doing really good. And I think in just a matter of a couple more months, we're gonna see a lot of these issues smooth out. But if I had to pick a winner, and I'm going to pick a winner, it's going to be Aorus right now. And this AX370 Gaming 5, just a beautiful, fantastic, super functional, rock solid, quality board. I love it. I highly recommend this, especially if you are going for like the 1600X or, you know, one of the Ryzen 7 processors. I'd say go for the full X370 chipset. Let's go ahead, dive into some overclocking and talk about some issues and get you some updates. I don't have my overclocking review yet, but it is a work in progress, and I need some more updates so I can really do what I want to do with this review. Let's go there. Okay, so now that I've got the motherboard situation out of the way, let's talk a little bit about what's going on here with the Crosshair first. So as you can see, I'm recording my monitor, and I've got a stress test going on in the background. I've got Ryzen Master going on here. So here's one of the quirky things I noticed about the Asus versus even the Aorus. Whenever I adjust things in Ryzen Master, I almost inevitably have to restart my system. So like if, you know, I want to go, well, yeah, I'm on the right profile. So, oh my goodness, really? Okay, let me go to right profile, there we go. So like, let's say I want to drop this down a little bit and I hit apply. See, following changes will restart the system. Do you want to apply now? Which I'm going to say cancel, obviously, because I don't want to do that. But that's what's weird about this, because I don't usually have that problem with the Aorus. I can adjust things on the fly using Ryzen Master. Now, maybe Asus software would do that, but I already had to install Asus software just to control LEDs, and I had enough fun with that. And that's been something that I've always seen Asus software having minor issues, and because of my time frames, it wasn't exactly something I had a lot of time to mess with. So yeah, as you can see right there, my memory clock's a little bit down. I might have had the 3000, but I'm pretty sure my G skill in there was 3200 megahertz. So there's just little things like that that I'm just like, I hope the AGESA code fixes that. I hope, you know, Asus is really good about releasing BIOS versions. So this isn't the only really quirky thing though. I will be right back and I will show you. This is me adjusting things in Ryzen, and take a look. You know, I'm running about a 50, close, you know, it goes from 52, whatever, but it stays around 55 degrees Celsius temperature if I set voltage and stuff like that. Now, I'll be right back, and I'm going to show you something that's really quirky. Okay, so I wanted to show you this real quick so you know I'm not crazy. Yeah, see, look at that. There's my memory frequency, 3200 megahertz, but as you could see when we were in Ryzen, it was showing around like 1500, which is half. So we would be, you know, equivalent of 3000. So yeah, my memory frequency just isn't quite, and here you can see just sitting in the BIOS, it's downclocked, but that can just be a setting. But you know, there's just things like that I've had. So let's, real quick, I'm going to manually set my CPU core ratio to 40 so that I will be setting 4000 megahertz frequency like I had with Ryzen Master. And then for the CPU core voltage, we'll go back to the 1.525. Hang on, I forgot. So with Asus, we need to go to manual mode. Then I can go 1.525. Hit enter, there we go. So we will F10, save all that. So now I've got my core ratios, my voltage, and my voltage override mode all set. Now let's go ahead and get back into Windows. Okay, so I don't want to run this too long because I don't like these temperatures already, but this is exactly what I want to show you. So here's the thing, 4000 CPU speed, if you come to OCCT, you can see the frequency is just a little bit below, but that's the normal 4000 megahertz setting. And once again, you know, this one will show me a V-core down here. Let me see if I can just see it. Yeah, CPU, so we're running about 1.55, right where I had it set. Same thing that I did with AMD Ryzen Master, but look at what happened to my core temp. My core temp jumped from hovering around 55 to hovering around 70. I don't know why that's happening, and I've went through a bunch of BIOS settings already to try to figure out. Now my memory clock looks like it popped back up, so I guess that's encouraging. But this core temp is just 15 degrees higher with the exact same settings. The only difference is instead of setting them in Ryzen Master, I've set them in, and I'm gonna go ahead and turn the stress test off now because we've seen enough. I have only set them, oh wow, we had a spike there up to 74. I set them in the BIOS instead of in Ryzen Master. So when you go talking about how good the Aorus board is, if I set things in Ryzen Master, then turn around and put those settings permanent in my BIOS, my temperatures were staying rock solid the same. This is why I don't have an overclocking review yet. This is not stable enough for me to really want, and I want to see how well this Crosshair does, but there's something going on here. And I think it has something to do with the fact that as soon as you set a manual setting for your clock speeds and your voltage, it's overriding some kind of power saving thing that is you normally, which is cool. You can leave a lot of power saving things enabled and it won't destabilize your overclocks. I love that about modern boards, but I think it's automatically disabling it, even though it says it's enabled, and it's causing my temperatures to just super spike through the roof. Really not sure. It could have something to do with DigiPlus. There's a lot of things going on in the BIOS on an Asus board that it's just hard to say, but regardless, I haven't changed any other settings. I shouldn't get a temperature spike like that. Makes me think that Asus has some work to do on their BIOS. Let's go ahead, move over to the Aorus now, see how that guy does. Okay, so now we've gotten all of our bugs out of the way. Let's talk about a little bit what I figured out about overclocking Ryzen so far, and we will continue from there at a later date. But for now, I think I've got some info that might be a little helpful. So there's a few things about Ryzen that are just really different. Now, as you can see now, this is the monitor that's hooked up to my Gigabyte Aorus board. I'm using the 1600X this time on this one because I'm doing a mid-range graphics cards, want to do a mid-range processor. I'm running OCCT with the medium data set again, and as you can see, my temperatures are, you know, a little bit warmer. It's probably warming up in my room too a little bit because I shut the door. But all around, everything too, we're gonna talk a little bit about what's going on here. So for starters, some of the things that I've noticed about Ryzen. So one big difference, huge difference, every chip that I've overclocked up until now, all these older chips, even Intel FX series, your temperature, your core temperature is primarily reliant, like hugely reliant on the clock speed. And so while you can up this V-core and it will affect temperature some, It's when you started upping the ratio or your clock speeds that you would start really seeing those temperatures getting higher and higher. And so that was just kind of the norm. So basically, you would see a temperature getting too high, you'd probably know, well, voltage isn't going to change that much, so I'm going to just drop it down a little bit to run at a safer temp. But Ryzen is so different than that. The temperature is almost entirely based on this voltage control. The higher you set that voltage, the higher the temp goes up. Doesn't matter. Now, it's like the opposite, because the ratio will still affect it some, but oh my gosh, this voltage, so here's what I'm seeing with Ryzen. So even though AMD didn't recommend going over, like, what was it, 1.4 volts, I believe. If you have a good 280 millimeter or a nice custom loop, you can hit 1.55 volts pretty darn easily. And I don't see that being a big problem. And you can usually keep your temperatures pretty good. You notice here I'm running at a solid 65 degrees, and I haven't really tried to push this 4 gigahertz. I might be able to be getting 4.1, 4.2 out of this. So I haven't really gotten to that point yet. But everything about Ryzen and what it can handle seems to be related on your voltage. Once you find out that your temperatures are going too much higher, then you're probably hit your voltage max. Find out where you're stable from there. Take it for what it's worth, but that's kind of what I feel like I'm finding out. Also, once you go over 1.55, it feels like the temperature starts exponentially just shooting up there. So even with great custom liquid cooling and everything, I don't expect you'll get much higher voltage than this, because the temperatures just start shooting up there. And I still haven't seen that being much of a difference. Yeah, if I get some updates, I'll update that as I keep working and new BIOSes come out. But so far, I haven't seen that changing much. That's when you start having to get into the realm of like LN2 overclocking and stuff. So yeah, 1.55 though, once you start, if your LLC is taking it higher than 1.55, you're probably going to see those temperatures spiking. So keep that in mind. Yeah, OCCT seems to be being a great benchmark. In fact, even Prime 95 is a great bet. I haven't really found a program that's bad to test Ryzen. When I get to the thing, I want to try to find the program that's the best, that seems to crash the earliest when I start bringing clocks back down. I want to see what would make that the easiest for the user, but I haven't gotten that far yet, so that's my other future plan. Let's talk about cooling. Now, if you know anything, and let me just see here, I'm pretty sure I put that up here. So we're going to start, We're going to start putting everything up here and see if we can really mess stuff up. So I'm going to throw up HW info. Now, you might have heard that AMD did this thing where there's 2 core temps, and here it is. HW info does a great job of showing it. You'll see a CPU TCTL, and look at that, we're running 83 degrees. Oh my gosh, am I burning this chip up? But then you've got the T die right here, or is that DLE? I think it's an T die. And that's 63. And that is actually, so what happens is this is a sensor that is intentionally 20 degrees higher. And the reason why AMD did this is if you go to the dashboard here, see what CAM's picking up? CAM is going to base their cooling off of this upper temperature. Now, because I'm overclocking, this upper temperature is actually way higher. At stock clocks, this thing may barely hit 60 degrees. So in order for Ryzen to control cooling the way that they wanted it to, they basically had to put this artificial temperature in here at stock clocks. At overclocking, it doesn't make as much of a difference. What I'd recommend to people like Corsair and NZXT who have software controlled cooling is that they have an option to choose the TCTL or the T-die when you are overclocking, and they adjust fan curves accordingly. Because right now, NZXT only monitors the TCTL on the CPU. So if I go to my tuning and I want to edit things and I want to set a custom profile like this, it's really hard. See this dot here? It's at 55 degrees. It's very hard to set. Well, that's because of liquid too. If I jump the CPU, it will go all the way up to 75, but I can't really adjust a curve past 75 because it's saying, hey, you shouldn't be running your temperature that high. The liquid thing works really good with Ryzen though. I used to not like liquid temperature, but I've got a very tight window of around 30 to 40 degrees so that I can really get that fan speed. And it actually is working really well on the Kraken. So that's how I'd recommend controlling fan speeds on things like the Corsair all-in-ones or NZXT Krakens and stuff. So the other thing then that brings us to is, and this is one of the other things, you're probably used to seeing a processor idle at around, you know, it'll idle temperature, oh yeah, it was right there. It'll idle temperature around like 30 degrees, and then you start running a stress test, you'll start jumping up to 60, 70 degrees. Ryzen does not do that. If I turn this test off, you're gonna see this temperature just hover. Look at that, 59. Ryzen has about a 20-degree range all the time in its temperatures. So if your core temp is jumping up to around 60, 65, don't expect the idle temperature to get much lower than like 45. The thing is though, is it's not heating up. You don't feel like tons and tons of hot air just coming off of your radiator though. It's running, for lack of a better term, efficiently. Like, it doesn't feel like it's just pouring heat into your cooling system or your PC. So it's very interesting that it has such a tight temperature range. There's some things that I've learned about overclocking with Ryzen. Sorry, I know this took a little bit of time to get through, but I hope it's a little helpful. Still planning on doing an overclocking review. I need those BIOS updates, and I want more stability though before I put an official Ryzen overclocking review out. So there we go, trying to help out. I'll catch you later.